Of all the fractured bonds in the pantheon of classic rock, few are as profound, as painfully resonant, and as endlessly analyzed as the schism between Neal Schon and Steve Perry of Journey. For decades, the story was one of a mysterious estrangement, a slow-motion divorce fueled by creative differences, personal grief, and the silent, agonizing drift that can occur between old friends. The narrative was built on a foundation of what-ifs and if-onlys, a tale of two brothers from different mothers who lost their way. In a series of raw, unfiltered, and deeply emotional public revelations, the virtuoso guitarist has shockingly reframed the entire narrative. The quiet, respectful distance has been shattered, replaced by a painful, specific, and shocking truth that has left the journey faithful reeling. According to Schon, the end wasn't just a drift. It was a deliberate, personal, and financial betrayal that he has carried like a shard of glass in his heart for years. To understand the magnitude of the betrayal Schon describes, one must first appreciate the height from which they fell. The story begins in 1977 when Schon, the fiery prodigy who had already cut his teeth with Santana, made a fateful decision. Journey at that point was a respected but commercially middling jazz rock fusion band. Schon, the band's consistent creative core, saw a need for a change, a new voice. He championed the hiring of a young, unknown singer from Oregon named Steve Perry. The alchemy was instantaneous and explosive. Perry's soaring operatic tenor, a voice of pure crystalline emotion, was the perfect counterpoint to Schon's searing, soulful guitar work. Where Schon's fingers flew across the fretboard with passionate intensity, Perry's voice soared above it, a beacon of hope and heartache. They weren't just bandmates, they were musical soulmates. Schon has often referred to their connection as metaphysical, a rare, almost psychic wavelength they shared on stage and in the studio. Together with keyboardist Jonathan Cain, they authored the soundtrack of an era. Don't Stop Believin', Faithfully, Open Arms, whose crying now asterisk these weren't just hits, they were secular hymns. They sold tens of millions of albums, filled stadiums, and cemented their status as American rock royalty. Schon was the band's musical architect, and Perry was its heart and voice. They were a unit, a partnership that seemed unbreakable, built on a shared dream that had been wildly, improbably realized. The first major rupture came in the late 1980s. The relentless touring and recording grind had taken its toll, and Perry in particular was feeling the weight. The tragic death of his mother, to whom he was intensely close, plunged him into a deep depression. Then, a debilitating hip injury, which he hid from the band for fear of being forced to cancel tour, became a physical manifestation of his internal pain. The Asterisk Trial by Fire sessions in 1996 were meant to be a triumphant return. The album was a critical and commercial success, yielding the hit Asterisk, When You Love a Woman. A massive, lucrative reunion tour was on the table. But for Perry, the old demons remained. His hip condition had worsened, and he needed a replacement surgery that would require a long and uncertain recovery. According to the long-standing public narrative, the band, and Schon in particular, grew impatient. An ultimatum was allegedly issued: get the surgery now and be ready to tour, or we'll move on. Perry, feeling pressured and unable to commit, walked away. For years, this was the accepted story, a tragic collision of medical necessity and business reality. It was a sad story, but one with understandable, if regrettable, motivations on both sides. Schon was the driven musician desperate to keep the machine running. Perry was the wounded artist protecting his health and his spirit. The fans mourned the loss but understood the complexity. The era of polite ambiguity is over. In recent years, particularly as Journey experienced a renaissance with new singer Arnel Pinda, Neal Schon began to peel back the layers of this decades-old wound. Through social media posts, interviews, and public statements, he has presented a version of events that is far more accusatory and personally damning for Steve Perry. The core of Schon's awful truth revolves around two central pillars: the Asterisk Trial by Fire reunion and the band's lucrative intellectual property. According to Schon, the common narrative of the Asterisk Trial by Fire, Fallout is a gross oversimplification that unfairly paints him as the villain. He claims he was not the one issuing ultimatums. In fact, he asserts that he was prepared to put the entire Journey enterprise on hold for as long as it took for Perry to heal. I would have waited for him, Schon has stated emphatically. I told him that we were brothers, we had just made an incredible album, what was another year or two. The betrayal, he reveals, came from Perry's side. Schon claims that after agreeing to the reunion and the subsequent tour, Perry simply disappeared. Phone calls went unreturned. Messages were ignored. There was no conversation, no difficult heart-to-heart between the two men who had shared so much. Instead, Schon and the rest of the band were left in a state of limbo, hearing nothing but silence from their frontman while potential tour dates and millions of dollars in earnings evaporated. This silent treatment was, for Schon, a profound personal rejection. The man with whom he had shared a metaphysical connection couldn't even pick up the phone to tell him he was bowing out. The business disappointment was secondary to the emotional devastation. The brotherhood in that moment of silence was irrevocably broken. If the silent exit was the emotional dagger, what followed was, in Schon's view, the financial twist of the blade. For years after Perry's departure, Schon kept Journey alive with a rotating cast of singers. He was the keeper of the flame, the one constant who ensured the music lived on. Throughout this time, he claims that Perry, though absent, continued to receive royalties from the music they created together, a standard and fair arrangement. The crisis point came in the 2000s, as the value of classic rock catalogs skyrocketed and the band's name itself became a priceless asset. Schon alleges that while he was on the road, tirelessly working to maintain the brand and legacy of Journey, Steve Perry quietly initiated a move to trademark the Journey name for himself. For Schon, this was the ultimate act of betrayal. It was an attempt to legally seize control of the identity of the band that Schon had founded in 1973, years before Perry even joined. It was the band Schon had fought to keep alive through every iteration and every struggle. He was trying to take the name of the band I started away from me, Schon has said, the pain and anger still palpable in his voice decades later. After everything we built together, after walking away from us, he wanted to own it. He wanted to prevent me from using the name Journey. This sparked a bitter and costly legal battle between the former brothers-in-arms. Schon was forced to fight the man he once considered his closest friend for the right to the name of his own life's work. While the details of the eventual settlement remain confidential, Schon emerged with control of the Journey trademark, but the experience left him with a festering resentment. It transformed Perry, in his eyes, from a grieving, distant friend into a calculating adversary. Neal Schon's decision to go public with these specifics has sent shockwaves through the Journey community. The fanbase is now starkly divided. One camp stands firmly with Schon. They see him as the loyal founder, the one who never gave up on the band, who was left to carry the burden alone only to be sucker-punched by the very person he had helped make a star. They view Perry's actions as the definition of betrayal, abandoning the ship and then trying to claim ownership of the lifeboats. For these fans, Schon's pain is not just understandable, it is justified. The other camp remains steadfastly loyal to the voice. They argue that Schon is airing decades-old dirty laundry in a distasteful public spectacle. They point to Perry's well-documented personal struggles and profound aversion to the spotlight, suggesting that his disappearance was a necessary act of self-preservation, not malice. They question the timing of Schon's revelations, often framing them as a ploy for sympathy or a way to bolster his own legacy at the expense of Perry's. To them, Steve Perry will always be the voice of Journey, a fragile artist who should be remembered for his unparalleled contributions, not dragged through the mud for his personal failures. This is the lingering mystery. After decades of relative silence, why has Neal Schon chosen now to unleash this torrent of painful history? Several theories exist. Some see it as a final act of catharsis, a necessary exorcism of demons he can no longer carry as he enters the later stages of his own life and career. The weight of being the villain in the accepted narrative for so long may have finally become too heavy to bear. Others see it as a strategic move in the ongoing battle over legacy. With Journey inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2017, an event that saw a painfully awkward, non-speaking reunion on stage, the historical record is being written. Perhaps Schon wants to ensure that his version of events, his truth, is part of that permanent record. And still, others believe it is simply the raw, unvarnished expression of a pain that never healed. The betrayal by a brother is a wound that time alone cannot suture. For Schon, the music he and Perry created was a testament to their bond. The silence and the legal battle were the desecration of that bond. By speaking his truth, however shocking, he is finally fighting back. The fairytale reunion that fans have dreamed of for over 2 decades is now an impossibility. Neal Schon has not just closed that door, he has, in his words, nuked it from orbit. The awful truth, he he has revealed is that the breakup of Journey's classic lineup was not a romantic tragedy of misunderstood artists, but a messy, bitter divorce featuring abandonment, silence, and a brutal fight over money and identity. The legacy of Journey is now a dueling legacy. There is the music, the timeless, uplifting anthems of belief, faith, and love that continue to inspire millions. And then there is the human story behind it, a cautionary tale about the corrosive power of fame, the fragility of friendship, and the devastating cost when business eclipses brotherhood. Neal Schon has shocked the fans by pulling back the curtain to reveal not a wizard, but a heartbreakingly human conflict. The truth, as he tells it, is indeed awful. It's the story of how the same two men who could so perfectly articulate the ecstasy of connection in songs like Faithfully could, in the end, become the embodiment of its most painful, permanent severance. The music remains a monument to their unity, but the history is now forever marked by Schon's revelation of their bitter, final divide.